This week, the PGA Tour and DP World Tour co-sanction and host the third Rolex Series event of the year at the Genesis Scottish Open. Some of the world's best players in the field. First round coverage coming your way tomorrow. It'll be a good watch. 8 a.m. Eastern time right here on Golf Channel. We're just a week away from the season's final major. One of the headliners in this week's field who has yet another chance to claim major number 5 after last year's near miss at St. Andrews. That's Rory McIlroy, who had entered that final round tied with Victor Hovland for the lead. Ultimately fell short by 2 to a streaking Cameron Smith, who won the Claret Jug for his first major. Rory's recent results at the Open. You see, last year was a third-place finish. You forget back in 2018, he was T2. That run of 16, 17, 18 was top 5 each and every year. Rory won the Open in 2014 at Royal Liverpool. For more on the state of Rory's game as he preps for the Open, let's send it out to Rex Hoggard over in Scotland.
Now, one of the most watched players this week will be Rory McIlroy, and it's not just because of how well he's been playing recently. He'll enter next week's Open Championship as one of the clear favorites when it returns to Hoylake, where he won in 2014, and he said the biggest challenge will be balancing those expectations.
Yeah, so I think, I played 4 weeks in a row, and then having 2 weeks off where I took, at least the first week of that 2 weeks completely off. I didn't touch a club for a little bit after that 4-week stretch. And I think just to get some competitive golf under my belt, get a scorecard in my hand and play, it's not pure links at this place, but it's linksy enough conditions. At least you're playing in a bit of breeze and, you're maybe getting some visuals that you would get at a links course. So I think just all of that will obviously be, will be good with one eye towards next week and the Open, but it's a big tournament, and I can make points on both sides of the pond for looking later down down the line at the end of the year for FedEx Cup and Race to Dubai and all that stuff. So I think this week serves a few purposes.
You just told Scott you're as confident in your game now as you have been in a really, really long time. Obviously, going back to Hoylake, we have so many good feelings. Is it a challenge, though, to temper your expectations? And if so, how do you do that?
Absolutely. I sort of dealt with that at Augusta this year. I felt like my game was in really good shape. And then, I just didn't produce what I needed to produce the first 2 days. And, that was disappointing. And I think I learned a lot from that. And just about, just playing a golf tournament. There's 72 holes is a long time. A lot can happen. It's a journey. It's a journey to get yourself into contention and to be there on Sunday afternoon. And there's a lot of golf shots to be hit and a lot of golf to be played. And the worst thing you can do in this game is get ahead of yourself.
Now, Wednesday's Pro-Am format was a 9-9 format, which means players only had to play 9 holes. But Rory opted to play all 18. And when I asked him why, he said he really wanted to focus on making sure his game is ready for links golf, both this week and next week.
Rex talking about, the run that Rory has been on. You look dating back to the PGA Championship, T7, T7, T9, runner-up at the U.S. Open, T7 at the Travelers. He has 5 straight top 10 finishes. Couple weeks off leading into this stretch now at the Scottish Open.
Look at what he's had since his last major championship victory. 14 PGA Tour wins, 3 FedEx Cups, handful of wins over there, and yet all we ever talk about is what he doesn't have, which is that 5th major title. And this one's a little testing for Rory, I think, psychologically as well, because going back to where he won in the summer of 2014, he's going to feel the same next year at the PGA Championship at Valhalla.
2 of the next 3 majors will be the same scenario.
Exactly, and it's tough enough, and other players feel this as well, I assume, like a Jordan Spieth, guys like that, where you're constantly measured against the player you were in a certain window. And it doesn't matter how good you are now, if you don't have those major titles, people are going to point back and say, well, you were at your best then, you were a different guy.
You did it once, why are you doing it again?
Exactly, and it's a sort of it's got to add an extra layer of poignancy or pressure, whichever you want, to Rory McIlroy heading in there next week to realise that this is a golden opportunity. He's proved he can do it on this golf course. He says now he's better than he ever was. arguably true, but the results in major championships have just fallen a little bit short, and not far short. I mean, he's got 19 top 10 finishes in majors since his last win, and 10 of those have been top 5 finishes.
I remember Jordan Spieth, and I want to say this was 2018 or so. He said, if I can give myself 2 legitimate shots at winning a major every year for the rest of my career, then I'm a happy man. Rory in contention at the PGA Championship, thick of it at the U.S. Open. So he's already done that twice. The million-dollar question is, what's going to need to happen for Rory to go from 4 to 5? Because the wait of time, the further it extends, the more weight he's dealing with when it comes to unmet expectations. So paint the scenario for me where you think it could happen.
Well, I think some careers go in chapters. You look at Raymond Floyd, for example, who won a major early in 1969, didn't win another major again for 7 years, then didn't win a major again after that for another 6 years until the PGA in 82. So you can have chapters, and Rory McIlroy is still only 34 years old, which is basically the age Phil Mickelson was when he won the first of 6 majors. But I do think it's a scenario where he's better coming from behind and charging. What we saw at the Open last year when he and Victor Hovland had a tie for the lead and they were 4 ahead of anyone else, and they both looked so tentative out there. And in Rory's case, there was a certain inevitability about the fact that the putts kept missing the hole, and that he just didn't look as aggressive, as comfortable, as assured of himself as he was in the 3 rounds that led him up there. And it leads me to believe that Rory McIlroy's chance of winning a major championship is going to come from behind. And also, in fairness, he's lost to guys who've actually played really well. No one would have expected Wyndham Clark to play as well as he did at LACC. Cameron Smith had a shoot of 64 last year to win an Open. It's not as though Rory's in the habit of shooting 75, 76 when he's in contention. Somebody just plays a little more assuredly, a little more aggressively, and a little better.
And they play with a little more freedom, and I would say. And you can throw in 2018 Masters. He's in that final group, misses that short putt on the second, and then the day completely shifts when it seemed like he was going to have an 8.
But he was 3 shots behind a guy who played a really solid round of golf starting the day, so it's not
true, but he didn't play.
But he was off.
Well, yeah, like we're accustomed to seeing Rory. That's happened now 3 times when we've seen him in that final group in a major. I agree with you where I think it's going to need to be a scenario, and we're going magic 8-ball hypothetical here, where Rory is, call it 4 shots back, and he's mentioned as one of the chasers. The focus isn't on him. He knows that he needs to go low and have that type of day that just comes together, and that's where it's going to happen, because the weight of expectations won't be as much than when you're under the magnifying glass in that final group and everyone knows you have to get it done. You're in control of the tournament. This is when it's going to happen.
Or you could just, win by 8 again, which he's done a couple of times before. And the last time he was at Hoylake, he won comfortably there as well. At one point, he had a half dozen stroke lead.
It ended up being a much closer margin. Ricky Fowler and Sergio.
I think he'd take the 6 ahead rather than 4 behind, to be honest. My money would be on him in that scenario.
I'm going to buy that for sure.